how are you going to conquer the market with your product, with your business? And this is very crucial because if you get this right. Welcome to today's episode of How Startups Grow. With this podcast, we help founders launch and run a successful startup by giving them actionable insights that help them succeed. This podcast is brought to you by Programmatic, the startup marketing agency. This is How Startups Grow. Welcome to today's episode of How Startups Grow. Last time we talked about the customer development model and we split it into two phases. First, you have to search for a business idea that is going to be profitable in the end, that solves a problem worth solving, that users want to use. Today we're going to talk about the next step. So you have established product market fit. How do you build a company from this? How do you scale execution to build a highly profitable business from this? We're here again with Dennis today, and me, myself, of course. So welcome back, Dennis. Welcome back, me. Let's get right into it.
Perfect. So if I'm correct, the next step would be customer creation, right?
Yes, exactly. So we're now going to assume that we did the search phase correctly. We did customer discovery. We did customer validation. We have a product market fit. Now we can build the business, which is every entrepreneur's dream, really.
Awesome. This third step, how does it differ from customer validation?
Yeah, so in customer validation, you're looking to achieve a product market fit, which means that you're trying to find a market that's willing to pay for your solution and that wants to use that solution and keep using it and keep paying for it. Now, that you have done that just a few times does not mean that you can always do that. So you have to find ways to get to the market as quickly as possible, as often as possible, and to get that profitability of the company running. You run into executional things now instead of just finding out what business to start.
And why is the customer creation phase crucial for startups?
So customer creation has strong links to your go-to-market plan, which is basically a plan. How are you going to conquer the market with your product, with your business? And this is very crucial because if you get this right, that means you're going to look for certain signals. And getting it right means that you're acquiring customers for higher profitability than what you're paying to finally get them. And if you do this, and if you can scale this, then you can move into the final step, which is company building, which comes later.
Let's first discuss the customer creation part a little bit further. So what are some effective strategies for acquiring and retaining customers during this phase?
Yeah, so you're going to want to look at ways to consistently approach the market. What is the key word for customer creation? For me, it's the word repeatable. You have to find a process you can do over and over again, and it's going to give you pretty much the same results. I can give you an example of this. Let's say I've built a business. In the first episode, we used video recording software, video streaming software. Let's say I started the business around that and I have product market fit. And now I have to find out how expensive it is for me to get a new customer and then how much that customer is going to get. So I might run some advertising campaigns to find out. And if I spend 100 euros on that, I'm going to get a result. If it's positive and I spend 1,000 euros on it, it might get a different result. And you have to find out how you can make that process of acquiring profitable customers as reliable and consistent, as repeatable as possible.
All right. So the first two phases also involve less investment and the third one more investment, or am I wrong?
What do you mean?
You say you run some ads at this moment, but we didn't discuss this in the first two phases in the last episode. So are you spending most of your money in this phase? You start spending more, or is it also in the validation part?
It's partially validation, but now you're not validating if your business is solving a viable problem with a viable solution. Now you're figuring out how to grow that business. So it becomes a little bit different. The reason why here, as a business owner, I would be more comfortable spending my money is because I know that I have a product market fit. So spending money is not just testing. You're actually getting customers, and you're getting profitable customers if you do it correctly.
So before this phase, you should already have some customers, or you're getting them at this moment?
I would suggest you have some customers already. And most investors, when we went to TNW conference, we were speaking to some investors, we were listening to some of the events, and one thing was clear with them. They prefer you having customers before you build the final version of your product.
So before this phase, you should already have some customers?
Yeah, when you and I went to TNW conference this year, we were looking at some of the investor speeches that were given and talking to them. And what they all said is when you build a company, ideally you have proof. And the proof is in the form of having customers already that are paying for your product or a more simple version of the product you're going to finally build. So it is crucial to actually have customers before you move into this.
Okay. How can startups identify their target market and tailor their approach to attracting the right customers?
Yeah, so your target market is something that you've defined in the customer discovery phase and the customer validation phase. So you can take that, you can take what you've learned from it, and you can use that in multiple ways. On the one hand, you will have your ICP, your ideal customer profile, clear, because you've spoken with them, you know which people are most likely to buy, and that's the people you want to target. On the other hand, the second benefit, you've spoken with them, which means you know of their problems and you know what they're looking for and what keeps them up at night, basically, which means you can craft messaging, you can craft campaigns that are really resonating with them, and you can build the right product for them. That's how I would use the input from before to then do these phases correctly as well.
So this phase is also about scaling. Am I correct?
Yes, exactly.
What are some common scaling problems startups face during the customer creation phase, and how can they address these issues early on?
Yeah, I think the most common one is that they skipped steps before this. So if you skip customer discovery, customer validation, and you go straight into scaling your execution and doing customer creation, you can try it, but it's likely that you're either going to fail because of the reason why most startups fail, which is a lack of market need for the product you're building. Or you could fail because there is a need in the market, but you're not messaging them correctly because you don't know of their problems. And there's actually a third option, which is you're building a company, it is successful in a way, but it's going to be stuck at mediocrity. Now, this is one of the problems. Usually this is the most common problem that they face. The second problem that they actually face here is that the customer creation process, it's about building something repeatable. You can repeat it over and over again. And something a lot of companies do is that their first customers come out of their own network, like their warm network, which is great because those people might want to give you some slack. They might be okay with a product that's not as great. They might be easier to reach as well. But if you then need to reach not just 10 people, but you want to reach thousands of people, your warm network is not going to be that big. So you have to find a way to scale that execution. And a lot of people get stuck there due to lack of skills. It's actually not easy building a repeatable marketing model or repeatable sales model.
So it comes down to product market fit again, right?
Yeah, product market fit and skills and execution.
So if startups find that their product market fit isn't strong enough to support scaling efforts, what steps should they take to revisit and strengthen their product marketing fit before moving forward?
Yeah, so what you don't want to do, because that's just horrible, you don't want to do it, you don't want to have to go back to the start. You don't want to go back to customer discovery immediately and say, oh, our product is bad, let's just start over. You need to see if you can pivot your product slightly without making too much work out of it. If you can pivot your business slightly, I should say, even because it's bigger than just the product, it's an entire proposition. So you're going to want to talk to your customers and you're going to want to find out why they became a customer, what's keeping them a customer, which features they're using the most, and how it has improved their lives. If you get those down, you can then check to see if your product is catering those needs or if you're actually optimizing or building for something else. So you can go back, but it often does require you to make some changes or adopt some new features into your product, which is expensive.
So preferably you stay in the customer creation if it's possible, but if it's necessary, you can always go back to the start.
Yeah, that's the worst case scenario is start over. And that's not a good scenario. But I think for some, it depends what your ambitions are. If you are stuck at building a mediocre company and you will never get past a certain amount of revenue, but you're fine with that, sure, keep it like that. Don't go back because it's a lot of work. But if you want to build a large business that goes through maybe funding rounds that might be acquired one day, that will scale beyond the entrepreneur itself, basically, then you have to go back. And that's a hard decision to make.
But in terms of long-term growth, I think it's always wise to at least consider it, even when it's a lot of work and it's like starting over, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It is worth considering. And if you can avoid it, if you have to adapt your product, let's say that, and you're building a software product and the adaptation is not just one feature that has to be adapted, then going back to the drawing board, it costs so much money. It costs so much time to go back. That really hurts. So you want to try and adapt it. If it's necessary, you have to change it entirely. But there's also a layer of complexity here that is bigger than just the product itself. Because let's say if you've built a company to this point, there is a chance that you did it with an investor on board. If you go to your investor that invested, let's just say they invested $1 million into your company, and you tell them, hey, thank you for the $1 million. We tried scaling, but we're running into problems. We're going to rebuild the entire product. That investor is not going to be happy. They're going to be really unhappy with it. So that's a complexity. And also what happens at this time is if you have a product market fit and if you have the investor backing as well, most companies have done some hires. So you're with a team. And what are you going to do if you go back to customer discovery? Are you going to fire your team? That's also something you don't want to do. So this decision, it's a really bad one to be in. But in the end, it does come down to the ambition of yourself and the investors that you have and the type of company that you want to build. But always try to find a solution.
Yeah. So the moral of the story is spend enough time in customer discovery and validation. So you're 99% sure you can move on to customer creation.
Yeah, you don't want to deal with this because this is really bad. If you skip the steps before, you have to deal with this at a certain time. And that's not nice for nobody.
So in terms of success for customer creation, what metrics should startups focus on to measure the success of their customer creation efforts?
So let's start with my own perspective. I have a foundation in marketing, and the marketing metrics that I'm focused on are the customer acquisition cost and the customer lifetime value. And then I'm also looking at some other things, such as the payback time for customers, which means if you get a customer now and you spend 300 euros and that customer brings in 50 euros a month, the payback time is 6 months, which means it takes 6 months for you to get all the money back so you can invest that same amount of money again. And this has significant impact on the speed of your growth. And then there's a final thing that I'm looking at as well, which is the volume, the potential volume in the actions that I'm taking. So if I'm doing a paid search campaign, or no, let's do a paid social campaign targeted at 500 people, there's not a lot of volume I can gain from that, unless you're selling very high ticket SaaS maybe, but there's not much volume. So then I can't scale because of that, because the volume is simply too low. So I still have to find other methods as well at that time.
So do you have an example of a company, a startup that you worked for, or just an example of a startup that did this customer creation very well?
Yes. I actually saw an example today from Uber, and this was a repost on LinkedIn by Gary Vaynerchuk, actually, because Uber had to find new markets all the time when they just started, because they started, I believe, in San Francisco where they were founded. But then when they went to New York, the picture of Gary Vaynerchuk was like a receipt and an email that was sent to the first Uber ride that was taken in New York. But then Uber had to repeat their model of introducing themselves onto new markets, new cities, over and over all the time. And if they did not have this process set up in a repeatable way, they would not be able to expand so quickly across all these cities. So this is one that did it absolutely amazing, in my opinion.
Interesting. I actually also saw the post.
Yeah.
Can we go to the company building part? Or is there still something you want to discuss about the customer creation?
Okay, there's a few things maybe, just some quick side notes. I said to look at the customer lifetime value and the customer acquisition cost. You have to find out what it takes for you to be profitable as a company. Because scaling your execution, doing customer creation, you also have to think about the business model scaling. And if it takes too long for you to earn back your money from a new client, or if getting a new client, it looks profitable, but your operational costs are too high, then you can't actually build a company like that. So you have to make these calculations in advance before you move on to the company building phase, because once you're in that and you're just scaling up, if you didn't do this correctly, these problems are going to arise and it's going to hurt you at a time where you can't deal with it. So you have to deal with it now.
It could be
one example for SaaS specifically. Most SaaS businesses, they want to get about 3 to 5 times return on investment or their customer acquisition cost compared to the customer lifetime value. So a customer, if you pay 100 euros, they should give you 500 euros over their lifetime. That's a benchmark. It's different for every company, but that benchmark is good to start out with.
So that's something to consider always to get to that number? Okay, that's a good metric. Yeah.
That's a very good metric, yes. And then also a thing is, don't move into the company building phase until you are quite certain that if you do scale up, that the speed is going to be there and that your profits is going to go with it. Now, there is an exception to this that I want to highlight, which you often see actually. So you can move very quickly into company building and be unprofitable for a long time if you have a lot of investments behind it and they know that the company is going to be profitable at 10 million users, for example, and you're at 100,000 or something, then yeah, investors might still put their money into it to get you to the point of profitability, because once you reach a certain point, it's just going to be ridiculously profitable, for example.
Yeah.
This is the one exception where you actually should move on, but this is something you do with your investors together. And that's only if you want to build something that's really big.
Yeah. I think that's also the story of Amazon, right? They also didn't make any profits in the first maybe 10 years operating, but it might be an exception to the rule. Or does this happen more often?
It happens more often. Let's say you're launching a social media platform. This is a very good example of this, actually. Most of the time, social media platforms earn money because of data and advertising, and the model itself, it's free. Now, if you don't have enough users on your platform, nobody's going to buy your advertising space. So you need to have that, what we call critical mass, which is the point at which your platform is that big that advertisers want to put their money into it to then finally reach profitability. But getting to that point means you have to acquire all these users without making any money on them. And then you have to have the investor there to help you build that company, build that user base to get you to critical mass.
Yeah, I understand. But still, this is, I think, it happens more often that you're profitable and you go to the next phase. And there are some exceptions for different models in general. Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
for sure. Yeah.
Let's say for most of the startups, how do they know when to transition from customer creation to company building?
Once they know that their business model will scale profitably and that there's also the potential execution-wise to scale quickly as well. You don't want it to transition for too long. You do want to keep some speed in there. And once you figure those things out, when everything is in place, then you can move to the next step. And one note with that is you also should not wait too long. So don't wait for everything to be right. Wait for everything to be right enough, especially the critical things.
Okay, yeah. It's quite complicated, but because it's not like a fixed amount or a fixed amount of profitability. You said an ROI of 5 times, right? 5%.
Yeah, 3 to 5 for SaaS. Yeah.
For SaaS. But you cannot really tie a number to it. So it's also a little bit of feeling, gut feeling, or when do you really decide then?
In the end, this is a financial calculation. The gut feeling, there are benchmarks to help us to set a target and say, okay, so this would be good. But once you reach that point, it's as simple as filling out the numbers in a spreadsheet. So let's say you get 10 customers and you pay 50 euros for a customer and they make you 100 euros. So if you go from 5 or 10 to 100, the numbers just multiply. And then you can see how your revenue is going to grow. Then you also need to take your costs into account. And your cost is not just the customer acquisition cost for marketing, of course. It's also the development team you need to hire, the marketing team you might have to hire, the office building. If you grow quickly, you might need a bigger office building. Like all those costs are going to rise as well. And you can calculate those. And if you have someone with financial background in your team or an outside accountant or CFO to help you with that, then you'll be fine. You'll be able to calculate that.
So for the company building phase, which elements are important in this phase?
Building the right team, building the right infrastructure in the company, maintaining company culture, building a company culture at this point as well. And keep in mind that you're building an infrastructure that is built to scale, because just starting company building, you're going to keep growing if you do it well, of course. So you have to build that infrastructure for scaling.
So what are the essential steps for startups to take when beginning the company building phase?
So most companies introduce more strict hierarchy at this point, which is necessary. So when you go into the company building phase, you might have a VP of marketing or a CMO. You might have someone to handle the sales team or customer success. In the end, you have to build the leadership team. And the leadership team, you want to find people that can align with your company for a longer period of time as well. And there are ways to do that. So hiring a senior marketer that wants to be a CMO for your startup, you have to give them something to stay with you because these are experienced people. They're going to have other job offers. You need a way to keep them there. Most of the times, this is done through equity deals where you would get a piece of the company if you stay for a bit longer. For example, a minimum of 4 years is often used, or 5 years in some cases. And that's something you want to set up with these people, with this team. Now, it is very important that you select the right people because these need to be people that can scale with you.
Would you say this is only important for C-suite or also titles below that?
C-suite especially, and VPs as well often. And a lot of startups also give a little bit of equity to all employees, actually. It's quite common that it happens. It's very small fragments, of course. But for the employees, it could be interesting because if your company that you're working for, if they want to be a unicorn and they want to be worth $1 billion, for example, if you own 0.001% of that unicorn, still pretty good bonus to step out of it. So that's something that the employees could use as well, but mainly VP and C-suite.
But what challenges do startups face when scaling their team during the company building phase, and how can they maintain their company culture?
This is one of the most difficult things for these companies because you're building the leadership team, you're hiring all these employees, you might have funding. It's not uncommon that you go from customer creation with a team of 10 people to company building, and within 2 years, you're suddenly 100 plus people. And there is going to be friction in terms of the culture there. You can't really avoid it. All I would recommend for that is hiring the right leadership team that can embody your core values with you. That's crucial here. And also the core values that you want your team to have. If you're the owner of the company, the founder of the company, you have to embody them too, because you have to lead by example in this case. If you do those things, you're going to prevent a lot of the problems, but it is still unavoidable that some people are going to come through that are just not meant for your company.
So why is it crucial for leadership hires to align with the company's core value? And how does this impact the overall culture?
Yeah, so the leadership positions, they're so important. Because if you have a sales leader that is not aligned with your culture that you want to build as a company, the hires that sales leader will make are probably not aligned with it either. So the higher up someone is, the CMO or the sales leader of the team or the CTO, whatever, the people they hire will be based on the core values of that person. So they have to be aligned with you. Otherwise, you're going to run into cultural problems. And there's something very important here. That means that you're not always going to hire the best person. That means that you're going to hire the person that best matches your culture and has the skills that are required.
What qualities should startups look for in leadership candidates to ensure they can effectively scale with the company?
So I think most importantly, the culture match. I think that goes almost above anything. And of course, you have to have a certain level of skill. Preferably, you can find people that were in a leadership position in a growing startup as well, because they know what's going to happen. They know there's going to be investors maybe, that they have to hire a team quickly, that they're going to work with agencies or whatever else comes on their path. And it doesn't have to be someone that was already a CMO in one of those companies. But for example, if someone was a director of marketing, then maybe that would be a good candidate for VP of marketing this time, because people want to advance as well, of course. So that's important. Joining in with the culture. Yeah, those are actually the primary ones I would look for in this case.
So in terms of the customer creation, what are the biggest challenges these startups have?
So common challenges that people face in customer creation, they're primarily about finding the right channels from a marketing perspective, finding the right messaging, finding the best way to communicate their value proposition, and to do it in a way that's also scalable. So this is the most common thing that people run into from the marketing point of view. From the sales point of view, there's also something interesting, which is that in early stages of the company, it's the founder doing sales. And the founder, it's not always the best salesperson, but it's probably the most passionate person about the business because it's their business. And training a sales team to replicate the founder passion, that's going to be really hard. So you need to find a new way to actually sell to these people, to the potential customers, that is not dependent on the founder's enthusiasm and the founder's commitment to it all. And that's something that a lot of sales teams actually struggle with because it's so difficult, because there's no example of how you should do it.
How can startups ensure their sales team effectively communicates passion for the product and deliver a personalized experience to potential customers?
If you have a good sales leader in your team, then they can find out how to do the sales with a bit less passion. Your salespeople are still going to try to exude passion, of course, for the product and for the service. Let's be real. If you're called by someone after signing up for a demo and the guy calls, "Hey, I'm Michel, I'm the CEO of this company. Really cool. Thank you for using the product." Or if you get called by me and I say, "Hey, I'm Michel, I'm a sales associate at this company," you're going to have a different conversation, of course. So you need to build the script that is still personalized. You need to find the salespeople with some level of passion, or at least the ability to communicate that passion as well. And then finally, you need to train the sales team and you need to adapt the script continuously to improve it.
Can you share an example of a hiring challenge you've encountered with a leadership position and how it impacted the company?
I was working as a consultant for a fintech startup that sells cryptocurrencies, like a brokerage application type of thing. And they had to hire a CMO. They found a guy. He wrote 3 books. He had a large amount of following on LinkedIn and social media. He was really a thought leader in it. Very experienced person, knew a lot about marketing. Sounds perfect almost. But then the problem was he didn't have management experience because he always worked for his own stuff and he never had to manage a team. And he had a very strong opinion about how things would be, because that's the thing. When you hire a thought leader, a lot of the times they're going to bring their opinion as well. They're going to bring their thought. Now, this could be good if the culture and the thoughts match yours, but in this case, it did not. So that CMO and the CEO, the founder of the company, kept clashing over small things, bigger things, cultural differences. Eventually, they had to fire the CMO. They lost a lot of time. They lost a lot of speed in this way. They had to find a new CMO again, which takes a lot of time to get a good one. And then after that, they kept growing. It went well after that, but they just lost a lot of time on that. And that's one of those problems. If you don't do this correctly, company building is going to be really hard for you.
What strategies can startups use to effectively identify and hire the right leadership candidates?
That's a very good question. I would first look into people you've worked with before, because if you've worked with someone, you know how they think, how they work, and that might be useful. Don't let it cloud your judgment. Don't hire your friends only because you like them as a person and you know how they work. But that could be something to look out for. Other than that, make sure that the interview process that you have with these people is not just about what they would do, but also how they feel about the culture, how they would influence it, what they would want to change, because you have to have an idea of what's going to happen. Now, do know your leadership team, they're going to have opinions and you should listen to them, and your company culture is going to change a little bit. That's fine. Do listen to them, of course, but don't change it entirely. Don't have a clash. And then finally, finding these people, that's quite hard as well. You can use job platforms such as LinkedIn Jobs or Indeed or whatever else is out there right now, but you're probably going to have to do a lot of these interviews, find the right person.
What advice would you give a startup in the customer creation phase to ensure they build a scalable model?
In customer creation, I would give the advice to find a scalable model and then have that fact checked. Make sure that it's true what you think and that it's scalable. A very important thing here is a lot of startups hire juniors because they don't have much money. If you do that, it might be fine. But then with this step, you need a way to evaluate the results and to see if it's going or not. And for that, some of these companies, I was often brought in as a consultant to do a fact check. That's something you can do. And another thing that you can do is if you have more senior people, you still want to fact check them, you would have to do so yourself. Data is everything here. Data is going to base, like all your decisions are going to be based on data if you're going to move out of customer creation.
So are there any resources, tools, or books you recommend for startups to effectively execute customer creation? And what areas should they focus on?
So I would still recommend the book Traction, which is about when do you know that your product market fit is strong, that you can scale with it as well. I would also recommend the Startup Owner's Manual still, because that's the entire model, it's in there. But here for customer creation, it often comes down to execution in sales and marketing. And then if you have a software product, that needs to work as well, of course. And those are that's like the trinity on which you do customer creation. product, sales, and marketing. So that would be my advice, to find the right people, to focus on those three things and move forward with that. Don't make it too complicated.
How has the process of customer creation evolved, and what role does technology such as AI play in customer creation and company building?
Customer creation keeps evolving quite a bit, especially from the marketing point of view. If I can talk about that specifically, of course, there's a lot of talk around topics such as demand generation, scalability, A/B testing. There's a lot of things in there that you can use right now. You can use AI to speed up your execution. There's so much in customer creation going on at once. You just want to find the right people that use the right technology to then grow your business as quickly as possible. As for company building, I think you can also use AI there as well, because the scalability of a company is something you can run past an AI to see what happens. Then also for that, the challenge becomes more operational. So hiring, building the infrastructure of the team, making sure the accounting is all in order, stuff like that. I don't have any specific resources for company building apart from the Startup Owner's Manual again.
So why is it important for startups to follow the customer development process? And what risk do they face if they skip steps or ignore mistakes?
So we've chosen this topic specifically because it's so important for startups to go through this. Now, what happens here with these topics, there's something very important about this all. And I've mentioned it in the beginning, and I'm going to repeat it. If you make a mistake in customer discovery, and you ignore that mistake, or you skip the step and there's a mistake there, and when you get to company building, that little mistake is going to be a massive mistake, because problems scale with your company. And it's much harder to solve that problem once you've scaled than it is to just solve it in the beginning. So always follow the process, always go back, do the fact check, be humble about it, and just really get the answers and be certain of those answers. Then you can build a very successful startup, I believe. Customer validation, customer discovery, customer creation, and company building. This is the customer development model, which was thought of by Steve Blank. Now at Perfumato, we actually do this with our clients, which are startups that are either in a very early stage where they want to validate their product market fit, or they want to scale their business and find a scalable model through advertising, through marketing, or they're at the company building phase where they just need someone to help them out with positive execution. If this is something that you as a startup founder or a marketer could use some help with, please check out perfumato.io. I would love to speak to you and help you through any challenges that you might have. If this episode was meaningful to you, be sure to follow us for more content about building a business. Thank you for listening to How Startups Grow.